Welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends. Well, as much as it drives Fuzzybutts all over this place absolutely crazy when they hear me say it, I am the host of this show, your big dog, Luke Robinson, back again with you this week. Well, it's been a couple of weeks. I've been out sick, unfortunately. My apologies. But we also have back with us again this week, Ginger Morgan. She's the co-host of this show, and she's also the executive director of the Puppy Up Foundation. Ginger, how are you?
I'm doing well. My allergies are bothering me, so I apologize if I sniffle through the whole thing. I'm not crying. So there's that. I'm looking forward to fall for many reasons. We have a couple of puppy up walks coming up in September, one in Des Moines on September 16th and one in later in the month of September in Lake Norman.
Excellent. Wonderful. That's great to hear. Congratulations on that. And would you give everybody the email or the website address where they can learn more and or sign up? Did you do that?
I can. You can go to puppyup.org and look under events, and all of our upcoming events are under there, and you can just click on the one that you are closest to.
Yeah, well, you're certainly not sniffling or crying for this episode and this guest, because I don't think we really have anything sad or depressing to talk about on this episode. It's got a great honor to introduce Doug Kenney. He's got a wonderful website. He's a veterinarian. In addition to that, he's been studying pet insurance for a long, long time. So we're going to talk about that. Ginger and I both have personal experiences, and I've wanted to do a podcast on pet insurance for a long time. Ginger, we wanted to do one, so we're really excited to have Doug here with this episode. Doug, welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you for being here. Well, we always like to start this show because even though we do talk a lot about cancer and whatnot, we like to keep it fun. And all about our Fuzzybutts. So do you have Fuzzybutts yourself?
Well, when my children were growing up, we had dogs and cats, and our last pet was a beagle, Penny Lane, and she developed lymphoma, unfortunately, and passed away in 2013. I handled most of the chemo myself, and she went into remission for about a year, and then it relapsed, as it often does, and she did not respond to the second round of chemo. So when her quality of life deteriorated, we wound up putting her down. And when COVID started, our daughter, who lived in California, moved back home, and she adopted a rescue dog that's a shepherd mix named Scarlet, and Scarlet is insured with Pets Best.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, Charlotte, what was I'm so sorry to hear about your loss. What was her name again?
Penny Lane.
Penny
Lane. Named after the Beatles song.
I was just going to say, are you a Beatles fan?
Yes.
My kids were.
I'm so sorry to hear that you lost Penny Lane, and I know that's a particularly tough type of cancer because it seems like it's one of the more treatable ones, but it can become problematic. So that's a tough one. And I always like to hear the names and write them down and remember them because we've lost so many. All of us have lost so many to cancer. It's not fun anymore. But it seems like you do have a Fuzzybutt, but just vicariously, it seems like.
That's right. My wife and I are both allergic to cats, and she's allergic to dogs also. So when Penny Lane passed, we decided at that time not to get any more pets. Our kids have pets, and so we're around them just for short periods of time, except Scarlet, who lives with us now. So yeah.
Well, it's a good thing you have one, because I'm a firm believer. I guess I can't imagine my life or getting to that point in my life where I don't have one. And I've lost 3 to cancer so far. Knock on wood. All 3 that I've lost to cancer. And I just, even still, it's not that I'm a glutton for punishment. I just can't imagine my life without my kids. It's just so I know that for many reasons, people reach that point in their life. Maybe it's the twilight, maybe it's a personal situation, but I dread that. I dread that day. Well, let's talk about your origin story, because you really have a particularly interesting one to me, Doug, because you're actually a veterinarian as well. So how did you get your start in this racket? That
Okay.
you've been doing for many decades now, and how did you get to where you're at now and what you're doing now?
Well, I grew up in Mississippi on a farm, and when I was in high school, I started working for a mixed animal practitioner, and I worked for him through my pre-veterinary studies, which I did at Mississippi State University. At that time, Mississippi State didn't have their vet school yet, and so I went to vet school at Auburn, where I got my degree. And after graduating, I practiced in North Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee. Most of that time was spent here in Memphis.
Was that large animal or small animal or both?
Small animal. I've always practiced small animal medicine and surgery. I guess I kind of got my fill of seeing the veterinarian come out at midnight when it was 30 degrees outside, delivering a calf. And so I decided that wasn't for me. So I elected to go the small animal route.
Yeah.
As far as how I got into the pet insurance end of it, I had referred a pet to a local emergency clinic one day, and I stopped by on my way home to check on the pet, and I noticed a brochure for ASPCA pet insurance in their waiting room. I actually was practicing when there was only one pet insurance company in the United States, VPI, and this was the first hint that there might be other companies offering pet insurance. Very soon after that, I got in the mail brochures from Embrace, Pet Plan, Trupanion, Pets Best, and so forth. And so I just was curious and started looking at their policies, called the company and talked with representatives. I developed contacts, relationships with these companies. A lot of times it was the founder, CEO of the company. And to be honest with you, those people were very generous with their time. They were patient and taught me most of what I know about pet insurance. Unfortunately, over the years, pet insurance has developed more of a corporate structure. Back then, when I first was introduced to pet insurance, I would consider most of those companies small businesses. And so lately, it's been harder for even people like me that's had previous relationships at pet insurance companies to develop new relationships and keep up to date with everything. As far as having direct access, I can ask questions.
Well, I apologize, Doug. I failed to introduce you as a fellow podcaster as well, and so I want to mention that to the audience that Doug has a podcast. It's called the Pet Insurance Guide. I have not listened to it, but I certainly will. Before we drop this, Ginger, I'll listen to an episode or two, check it out, and I'll include my feedback in the show notes when we drop this episode. Because I have a respect for fellow podcasters, and I certainly have respect for what you're doing and trying to find the insurance carriers that are best tailored for pet parents. Because as someone, myself and Ginger as well, she could speak to it separately, of course, having so many loved companions, Fuzzybutts, that have been in crisis, that have needed health care. There certainly have been some bad insurers out there, and we've had some horrible stories out there, but more recently we've had some good ones. So I want to stick on with a point you just made, though, because I have a question. So you're saying that as of late, the pet insurance business is scaling, which the bigger society gets. So hopefully, right now we're saying that there are 6 new cases of cancer in dogs alone. So you apply that across cats, you apply that across other diseases. We have lots of illnesses in our companion animals every year. I'm not sure what the exact number is. I've never been able to find precise statistics out there on numbers of cases. I don't really think we have them. And a lot of the numbers I know are just educated guesses. But so to me, the way I look at it, Doug, is scaling is a good thing. I'll give you a specific example. We're trying to launch. We will launch ultimately Hudson's Hope to help help defray the cost of cancer care for companion animals. I've lost, as I said, 3 dogs, and I know myself. My first one, Malcolm, I don't recall. That was 2006 when he was DX'd, or 2004 when he was DX'd. And then Murphy, I know more because his was 2011, and I think Ginger was 25 to 30,000. I think at least at a minimum, we did a couple of rounds of radiation.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Hudson was a little bit faster, but over his lifetime, he had, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 mast cell tumors pulled off him. So I've spent a lot of money on cancer care in my lifetime, and so from my perspective, the more money, the more capital that's available out there to help pet parents afford increasingly more expensive care for their companion animals. It's a good thing. But so that's just how I see it. So, but how you see it on your end is that as a result or consequence of insurers scaling, it's making them less accessible to you. So what else are you finding that's a bad aspect of insurers scaling and becoming less accessible?
I think from a consumer standpoint, customer service, I don't think is nearly as good as it used to be when the companies were smaller and you had the founder, CEO, who started the company, was involved in day-to-day decision making, design of policies, and so forth. And when those people got pushed out a lot of times, and the board hired new people to take over that really didn't have that same vision that the founder had for their company. They've tried all kinds of new gimmicks and gadgets that they've used in other corporations before they came to the pet insurance industry. And sometimes it just hadn't worked. And there's been a lot of complaints, I think, from consumers that just as I have felt a loss of, I guess you might say, good relationships with people at the pet insurance companies, I feel like consumers may also be shortchanged in that regard.
Well, and the veterinary business is a relationship business. You're talking to, and that's kind of how we preface this episode, is that you're talking to pet parents who are going through a major health crises with their loved one. Their loved one is going through a health crisis of some sort, and these are our loved ones, and it's a very vulnerable place to be. You're anxious all the time. You're scared and stressed all the time. And the financial realities, it's a reality. It's becoming a harder, colder reality. I don't know how, as of yet, how much I've spent on Indiana trying to diagnose why he's losing his mobility in his hind legs. But we've spent quite a bit, and we'll get into the cost of veterinary care here in a bit. But so it's all relationship, right? The veterinarians that I have chosen as his care providers, I need to trust their surgical skills. I need to trust their diagnostic abilities. I need to know the man or the person, the woman, the veterinarian that I'm dealing with, and that's going to be caring for my kid, my Fuzzybutt. And so you're absolutely right about that. I think in particular you mentioned Pets Best. I think Jack was the founder of that. Was that his name?
Right.
Captain Jack, I think is his name. Did you know him and deal with him?
Yeah, I knew him.
Yeah.
I didn't know him real well. I mean, I've met him in person several times. I've had him as a guest on the podcast and so forth. And great guy.
Well, I figured you were talking about Captain Jack because he's well known in the industry. He did wonderful things with Pet Best. I have a Captain Jack story. I'm a little bit irritated at him because my first walk after I lost Malcolm was from Austin to Boston, and talked to Jack, and he was a cancer survivor, is a cancer survivor. And then he also lost a dog to cancer. And so he loved the mission, what we were doing. And so he came on as a sponsor for my first walk across country that ultimately became the Puppy Up Foundation that we now focus on companion cancer and comparative oncology. And so I like Jack. We talked a couple of times, but then Jack brought in a PR guy or something like that, and he wanted a follow vehicle. And I'm like, well, I don't know how long it's going to take me to walk with two dogs. What ended up being Ginger, 2,300 miles, I think in total, took over 2 years.
Right.
So when I was playing it, I'm like, well, Jack, I don't know how long it's going to take us. And I feel nervous about having a follow vehicle that's following us all the time. And plus, for a number of reasons as well, I wanted to be kind of a spiritual walk for me and my boys. And so the business guy or the PR guy got in the way of me and Jack, and he killed the deal. He completely, so unfortunately, Pets Best did not, because I was very excited to have Jack and Pets Best on board as a sponsor for my first walk, because I'd heard so many wonderful things about them. But since then, I do know that the game of pet insurance has changed. And so let's talk about, before we get into maybe some examples of that, some of my own pejorative examples or Gingers. Let's just kind of talk about the business of it. First of all, how long have you been doing this podcast? So you've been doing it. How long have you been focused on insurance, pet insurance?
I started looking at it in 2008.
Okay.
I started the blog in 2009.
Okay.
And the podcast in 2012.
All right.
And the podcast I just started, it was just a different medium to reach people. I am an avid reader. Since audiobooks came out, I'm an avid listener now. Yep. So that's just my preferred way of consuming information.
I tell you, it's important, and for me, that's how I consume most of my data and information, because I just don't have the bandwidth to sit down for long periods of time. And so it's a great way, and I commend you. So you were really an early adopter of the podcasting world. It didn't really start maturing. I think 2011 was when it started to really, 2008, 2009, then 2011. So you've been around, you've been doing this. So you're I guess you're an OG, is what they call an OG of podcasting. So Doug, what have you learned about pet insurance, like the economics of it? And I kind of mentioned, because I've tried to talk to a number of people about that, and I just can't get any hard data. Do we know, like, for example, how many pets are insured, like how many dogs are insured, cats, and the average cost of insurance? Do we have any of that data out there that's accessible?
It is, and I agree with you. It is very hard to get the type of information that you're after. They throw out broad numbers, but generally about 2 to 3% of the pets in the United States are insured, and 80% of those are dogs. There are not enough cats insured, and it's really strange to me. I think the predominant attitude is, well, most cats are indoors now, and they aren't likely to get hit by a car or get in fights or whatever outside. But if you look at the top 10 reasons for claims in cats, almost every one of them are equally, if not more, predominant in indoor cats. Wow. And premiums for cats are roughly half what they are for dogs. So they're much more affordable. And I can tell you from my own experience in practice, cats are just as likely to get sick and have just as expensive needs, treatments as dogs are. So I don't think nearly enough cats are insured. And
I wonder if that's that's a very salient point. I appreciate you pointing that out, but I wonder if it's because the number one killer we know in dogs is cancer now, so we know that. Like I said, 6 million new cases a year is what they think is probably a pretty good estimate. I think it's a little bit higher, but we know that cats don't get a lot of the cats really aren't the same model for cancer in people that dogs are, and they don't get nearly as many types of cancers that dogs get. And in some cases, it's an entirely different type of cancer. It's a different mechanism of action, pathology, so on and so forth. So I wonder if that would be a reason for that, because the number one with dogs, but that would also lead me to the next question is, is cancer like the number one claim for insurance claims? How big is cancer in the world of dog insurance? Do we know that?
I mean, out of the top 10, I don't think it's number one.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
I don't think. I mean, I could probably search for that information, but
Yeah.
But if you look at the top 10 claims for cats and dogs, chronic conditions predominate those lists. And most people do not think about chronic conditions being that big a deal. When they think of chronic conditions, they think, well, when my pet gets 8 or 9, he may get cancer, or he may get diabetes or kidney failure, that type of thing. But most pet parents underestimate that chronic conditions can occur less than a year old.
Yep.
I diagnosed a fair number of allergies in pets that were less than a year old. Now, if they try to sign up for pet insurance, that's not insurable. It's a pre-existing condition, and they're going to be faced with a lifetime of paying for a chronic condition where they're going to have frequent visits to the vet, probably lifelong medication and therapy and so forth. So that's most pet owners just don't understand that or perceive that.
I wonder if I find that the other thing that's important to kind of add to this conversation is that country vets still dominate the profession. And from what I've backpacking across 19 states, and meeting so many veterinarians, country vets, specialists, oncologists that I've met, I've tried to study and understand that and the difference between it. I think country vets, because they're dealing in a more rural setting, tend to underdiagnose and be a little bit more conservative because they have clients that can't afford a lot of bells and whistles, right? And so as a result, they don't push their patients to specialists, right? So the dog gets diagnosed with cancer. The country vet then says, oh, well, it's bone cancer. There's nothing you can do except cut off its leg, and then it can't walk around good because it weighs 120 pounds, and big dogs can't get around on 3 legs, which we know is false, but that's the vet's way of letting off the hook of not pursuing treatment or not feeling guilty about treatment they can't pursue or they can't afford. So I wonder if that contributes to it, and that they just don't recommend, if that's one of the reasons why we're not seeing as many insured pet parents. Do we know, Doug, what percentage of pet parents are actually insured? Do we have a percentage of that?
I don't
percent of
know
all pet
that.
parents, or wow.
I mean, most people have more than one pet. So,
right.
Now, I mean, if you have more than one pet, insuring all of them is problematic too, because it can get expensive in a hurry.
Ginger, the poster child for that right there. How many kids do you have? Have you rescued Ginger?
Well, now I have officially 4, and the 2 younger ones are insured. The 2 older ones are not.
You have,
And
oh, you have 5. You have, what are you talking about? Mayberry, Lolly, Lily,
well, Lolly,
Henry, and
I
Smiley.
don't pay
And
I don't pay
you have a
Lolly.
cat. And you have a cat. How do you not even know you own kids?
Well, I'm talking dogs
Oh,
because you know what? Cats aren't insured.
well, I was going to make fun of you about not. I was going to ask you if you've insured Izzy. If you've,
Izzy,
yeah.
no, I didn't insure Izzy when my friend Nancy passed away and I got her cat Izzy. And her family was like, "Oh, the cat's old and she's probably only going to live another 6 months." That was 2017
Hmm.
and the cat is still trucking on. I mean, she tells Luke's Great Pyrenees, Indiana, that weighs 100+ pounds what to do. So, had I thought she was going to live forever, I probably would have insured her. But
Yeah.
when I thought about insurance, one, I had 14 dogs at the time, and it was problematic to say the least. So I didn't do it. But let me tell you, Lily has had 2 stomach cancers, 1 mast cell removal, and she has allergies as well. So I call her my $30,000 dog, that was rescued from the Humane Society. And I don't even think I was charged for her. But so she's my $30,000 free dog. But, bless her heart, she's going to be, knock on wood, 16 years old in November, and I'm still spending money on her. So there you go.
But I like what you said a second ago, Doug, and it's very important. And I don't want that to get overlooked. And you talk about chronic diseases, and so now both of my fuzzy butts are insured. I have Nationwide. I want to talk about them a little bit because I'm very pleased with them. Ginger, I think, has Trupanion or something, so we can talk about insurers, especially the ones that are doing some good. But Grayson, he's my 5th Pyrenees, and he was a rescue. And by the time I got him, he was amputated, had 1 limb amputated that was just amputated because of an abuse neglect situation. And the other thing that happened is he had heartworms. So I'm on the hook for 2 things for a lifetime with him now. We had to go through heartworm treatment that the rescue did not help pay for that at all. And it was very expensive over the course of a couple of years. And he's now heartworm free finally. And then now has arthritis, because he's 3-legged and he's only just now 3 years old. So he's going to have arthritis for his lifetime. So,
However, on the arthritis, Nationwide covers it.
oh, somehow I thought that they associated that with 3-leggedness, and that was
No, they don't.
Okay.
They don't.
Is he insured to the rescue? Here's a question for you, Doug, and also you, Ginger. Here's a joint question for the 2 of you. Is there a way that a rescue, when they take a dog out of a really bad situation like that, and they know they have to do medical, whatever has to be done, for them to get a temporary insurance policy through the shelter or rescue, and then that protects, and then that policy is transferred over to the whichever pet parent that adopts? Is there something like that, a temporary? Because that really, so that's good about the arthritis. I thought they didn't cover the arthritis, but the heartworm cost thousands of dollars, and I was completely on the hook for that because it was a pre-existing condition by the time I adopted him. But so do they have can shelters and rescues get insurance for animals that they're caring only temporarily for?
Yeah, they can. Now,
Do they? Is that common practice or is it rare?
There are some pet insurance companies that have relationships with particular rescues and shelters. And it will not cover pre-existing conditions no matter what. But a lot of these shelters can get a policy that transfers to the new owner when the new owner adopts the pet. Whether the new owner chooses to continue the coverage is up to them.
And I guess there's no Barack Obama in the pet world to make sure that pets get there's never a pre-existing condition when it
No.
comes to pets, because that would be a great thing because they're because as we know that companion animals sometimes get lost and or they change hands or there's a transfer. I'm trying to avoid the legal term transfer of ownership, because I don't like to think of companion animals as being owned. I don't own my fuzzy butts. It's quite the opposite with me, but with them, they own me. But I think that is an important issue, because think about like Lyme disease. That's potentially, I mean, heartworms is, as you know, heartworm can do considerable damage for the entire lifetime of a companion animal. It does get expensive. And at the end of the day, as much as we don't like to talk about it, Doug, I know you don't like to talk about it. I don't. I hate it. Ginger's more of the business oriented person taking care of the back office stuff. I hate talking about it because I don't like reducing loved ones. I don't like reducing loved ones to dollars and cents. So, but that's a reality. The cold hard reality is that the cost of care costs, and it costs a lot. Doug, are you seeing it like we're seeing it? The cost of care in veterinary medicine is on the rise.
Yeah, it is. In fact, it's increased dramatically just in the last 5 years since I retired. I still go to local veterinary meetings, CE meetings, and so forth, and talk to the other vets that are still practicing, and they've all seen that. And I think it's just a combination of inflation, plus the diagnostic and treatment options that are available to veterinarians now are so much more sophisticated and therefore more expensive. I think pet owners today, as you alluded to, Luke, are considering their pets a part of the family. Therefore, they're more willing to spend money on their pets than in previous years. And hopefully veterinary medicine is evolving from a treat the symptoms model to a diagnose the underlying cause and treat that, which will be more effective. And so I think all of that goes into the increased cost of veterinary care, and that translates into the increased cost of pet insurance premiums also.
Well, I'm not being. It has hyperinflated over the past 5 years because of the hyperinflation that in the economy that we live in, and that deeply concerns me, especially as it pertains to the cost of cancer care, because you don't want pet parents to have to choose poorly or choose unfortunately when it comes to caring for their mate, for their loved one, and that's just a terrifying reality that you don't want anyone to have to go through, because you said it perfectly, is that we do value our companion animals much higher in society nowadays than we did 10, 20 years ago, and that's a great thing. But what comes with that is the huge responsibility of when you adopt a companion animal, or when you bring it into your home, you're now responsible for their health and happiness and all the things that come with that, because they didn't choose. They don't have agency. They didn't come to choose to live with you. Just like Grayson didn't choose to live with those people who just chained him in the front yard and let him get an infection in his leg that cost him his leg, but that was still their responsibility. If you can't care for them and care for them well, whatever that is, that's where it gets tough, because how much is there are just some pet parents that can't afford top shelf marquee cancer care, because it's in the $30,000 range. Now we're looking at immunotherapy is one of the new treatment modalities that's coming out, and that's very exciting, because we've know that's the fourth type of cancer care that seems to have potentially the least destruction in its wake for the patient. But I haven't seen any pricing yet, but my guess is that's going to be very expensive. We just interviewed. I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
When I say veterinary, when I say inflation,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not necessarily talking about the inflation we're experiencing with gasoline or groceries or, in general. I'm talking more about the new treatments available that are more expensive. For instance, several years ago, a drug company came out with a product called Serenia for vomiting that's very effective. It replaced whatever drug we were using previously to treat vomiting. And vomiting is a symptom of a whole myriad of diseases in dogs and cats. Therefore, just treating, say, a case of pancreatitis went up just because veterinarians are using Serenia now.
Right.
Yeah, that's not an inexpensive drug.
No, it's not.
Well, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
And y'all have alluded to, and I know you've had some oncologists on your podcast that have talked about new modalities for treating cancer. You just alluded to one, immunotherapy for cancer, for allergies, the radiation therapy where they treat like 3 or 4 radiation treatments. It's more focused. I forget the name of it exactly, but rather than having to go through 20-something radiation, much more effective, much more expensive.
Right.
So that type of thing is contributing to the cost.
Yeah, we certainly, you're absolutely right. And I didn't mean to either glaze over that or skip over it, that we have significantly better tools than we did 20 years ago. And the cost of discovery and development, it comes with a very, very big price tag sometimes. We have 2 new drugs that are coming out on the market this fall that are exciting. We've got Librela for osteoarthritis, which I'm going to put one of my kids on, and I'm excited about that. I don't know what it's priced at, but we also have a new cancer drug coming out. And Ginger, I'm going to butcher because I have dyslexia, and I always get things. Gilvetneb? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, that's close. Yeah.
It's something like that. It's the good. I forgot the class of oncology drugs it's in. But anyway, it's new and exciting. And I think it's like $100,000 a dose in humans was what Phil Bergman was saying to us. And
Yeah.
That's prohibitive for pet parents. But hopefully but all that is just money, right? We should in America be able to somehow, and that's what I hope to accomplish with Hudson's Hope and hopefully working with at some point with Big Pharma, is that we're just talking about spreading costs, right? That's all we're talking about is spreading costs. And so it's a tremendous, it's really a game changer in oncology drugs. And we want it in the veterinary market. We want patients to select it, right? We want patients to use it, because supply needs that demand. The greater that we have, the more demand we have with pet parents to choose advanced treatments and diagnostics, right? Then we get better tools, right? If we show industry that we're in the market for better tools, then we're going to get better tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't find bigger proponents for better tools than me and Ginger. But it's a financing issue, and that's what I kind of have a tough time with. And that's true of pharma in not just veterinary medicine, it's also true in human medicine, is that in the United States, pharma subsidizes the rest of the world, and it's at the expense of the American consumer, and that means pet parents and veterinary medicine. And I have a problem. But that's a conversation for really a different time, and that's a much more complicated issue. But we need better tools, absolutely, and that's why I recommend to as many pet parents as I talk to is that choose. There's many reasons for choosing advanced diagnostics and therapies. There's many reasons for doing that, and one of it is we just need better tools. Period. Okay, Doug, so what is some of the so we have in the spirit of having better tools out there for pet parents, we also have better payment tools, and that includes insurers. So you said when you started this business of yours, this podcast, there were only a handful of carriers. How many are there now? And what are some of the more interesting ones? And then maybe you can give us some criteria and some guidelines for pet parents when we're looking to choose some insurance companies.
Well, when I started, there were about 8.
Okay.
Then around 2010 to 2012, there were about a dozen, and it stayed about a dozen for several years. Now there's probably over 30 brands
Wow.
of pet insurance. And so it's very difficult today for pet parents to wade through all of that and try to select a company to insure their pet. And I personally have always refrained from recommending a specific company because a company that is on my bad list today could very easily be on my good list tomorrow if they were to launch a new policy. So it's all, when people say, what's the best pet insurance company? I think that's the wrong question. The question should be, what's the best company for me and my pet for my situation?
Right.
Because every pet parent's financial situation is different. How much money they have in savings, their discretionary income, available credit, and so forth. And so that's going to determine how much they can afford for a premium, how much they can afford, which deductible, reimbursement amount, and policy maximum they can choose. And from the pet's perspective, every pet is unique also in their medical history. So that's going to play into which company they choose also. So pets and pet parents' situations are unique. What their neighbor recommended may be perfect for their neighbor, but it's not the right company for them.
So do you have an interactive guide on your website for your podcast, Doug, that you help guide pet parents through this process to make the best educated decisions?
I have a pet insurance toolkit that I offer.
Excellent.
That will help them narrow down their choices, excuse me, of companies, and hopefully get down to 2 or 3, and then be able to choose from that.
Where can people find that toolkit?
Just petinsuranceToolkit.com.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. There you go. Insurance. Got to write it down for the podcast notes. Insurance toolkit. That's easy to remember. All right. So
when I started looking for pet insurance, it was overwhelming.
Yep.
So,
I mean, when there was a dozen companies, people were telling me it's overwhelming. I can't deal with it. And
I just stuck it out there on my Facebook page, and I said, what pet insurance company do you use? What do you like about it? And would you recommend it? And I chose based on 2 veterinarians who said that they had Trupanion. I was like, okay, well, they get it. They're both oncologists. So I'm like, okay, they get it. They understand where I'm coming from. So, but that might not be for everybody. So,
I mean, every company has its positives and negatives. And so it's just a matter of which the criteria you're deciding on and how that company lines up with your preferences.
It really is. And let's just take 2. I guess now is kind of a good time for the anecdotal part of the podcast. Is I have Nationwide, and it's a trade-off. I always liked what Thomas Sowell said, is that there aren't any solutions in life. They're just trade-offs, and that's very true. And so I have Nationwide, and I love the fact that their reimbursement is seamless and it's very fast. Because the float kills pet parents. If pet parents have to, because as you know, the veterinarians demand payment today. The time of service, obviously, for obvious reasons. And so you have to pay today. And so most, if not all, pet insurers reimburse. I don't think there's anyone that pay up front at the point of sale, right? It's all reimbursed.
Trupanion
Companion
does
pays.
if the veterinary hospital has their software
Got it.
installed.
They have to have their proprietary software.
Now,
Right.
they can, and probably about half the other companies will pay the vet direct.
Okay.
But the veterinarian has to be willing to accept payment from the insurance company. And they don't do it in real time like Trupanion does if the hospital has their software. So this is one of my hot buttons here as far as the shortcomings of the pet insurance industry. The frustrating thing to me is that there's not been a lot of innovation in the pet insurance industry, and really since Trupanion came out with their software. I mean, their founder, Darryl Rawlings, did have a vision of eliminating the reimbursement method. And so they spent a lot of money coming up with a software that veterinarians can install next to their practice management software and get in contact with the company 24/7 and get a claim approved and adjudicated within 5 minutes or less.
Yep. It's when I haven't met my deductible on because I have my younger dogs insured through Trupanion. But really, when I went to the vet last time, my dog Smiley has allergies. They gave him one of those shots. I can't think of the name of it now. And I'm like, hey, see, go ahead. I know I'm not at my deductible, but file it with Trupanion. And she does. Yep. She goes, that's $250 towards your deductible on Trupanion. I'm like, yes. And I did choose on Trupanion, just so people will know, I chose a high deductible so that my premiums would be lower.
Yeah. So that's a problem for all the other insurers, okay? Because how many pet parents do y'all think can afford to pay upfront $5,000 to $10,000 out of pocket,
Sure,
and then get reimbursed?
right.
Not many.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
No.
So in my opinion, that's why there's only 2 to 3% of the pets insured in this country. Because I've heard stories of people who had insured pets that went to the emergency center in the middle of the night or a holiday with a critical problem. And guess what? Their pet insurance company was closed for business.
Yep.
They can't get in touch with them. They can't verify coverage, even if the emergency center wanted to work with them.
Right.
And would accept direct payment from the insurance company. They ended up having to put their pet to sleep, and they were insured. Okay. So that right there, not being available 24/7 is a big problem. And, I've talked with pet insurance company representatives on my podcast and mentioned that to them. They said, yeah, that's something we're looking at. But nobody seems to be willing to think that's a big deal. Well, it's a big deal to
It's huge. And
people.
I've also ran into a couple of things is like, well, you have to have the procedure done, then they'll approve it. They won't pre-approve. I think Trupanion pre-approves.
Yeah.
But others, Nationwide does not pre-approve.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to interject is that's infuriating with Nationwide, because we're looking at doing stem cells with Indiana and they won't give an up or down on it. And so until we actually do the actual procedure, I'm like, well, you know what? Of what value is that? Because it's $3,100 to do stem cells. So yeah, having that information up front. But it amazes me, Doug, though, because I have a business background. I used to help build high tech and biotech companies in Texas, a part of the high tech corridor in Texas. And adoption is that is the number one thing with technology, right? Is that will a customer or consumer adopt or use your technology or your service or whatever? And we just discussed, and I think we all know, is that the rate limiting step to pet parents adopting or getting out, taking out insurance, is the speed with which they're reimbursed or the accessibility, the customer support when it comes to making medical decisions. That has to be 24/7. It has to be in real time, or else, like what you said, and I've had to do with Nationwide, is I've had to float it for a week. And so I guess that's how I see it.
Or longer, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but yeah, they're usually a week. Anyway, but it's sometimes it takes a little bit longer, and that's hard to do. Especially if we're floating it with something that bears interest, it makes it more expensive. So if you use a credit card and you're floating it with a credit card that has 12% interest or whatever the case, it makes it a lot more expensive. So I completely agree with you, and I am amazed that pet insurance companies don't understand that, is that unless the service comes first before the customers, right? That should be a self-evident thing.
Yeah. So the that is a real problem, I think, with most people adopting pet insurance. And just to be honest with you, I don't know how many pet parents who are insured, their pets are insured, actually realize that. If their pet has never had an emergency or an expensive healthcare event, they're likely going to be surprised when they have that, and then the vet asks for $2,500, $3,000 deposit up front on a $6,000-$7,000 bill.
Yeah.
And they may not have it, and that insurance is not going to do them any good. So I'll tell you how I have come to look at pet insurance. Those people who have pet insurance, by and large today, are people who can afford to pay a big bill out of pocket and then get reimbursed. Therefore, a pet insurance policy is just a asset recoup, vehicle. And so, again, I think everybody wonders, keeps asking, why is only 2 or 3% of the pets insured in this company? Let me ask you this. Any other industry that's been in existence for 40 years and has only penetrated 2 to 3% of the market, would they still be in business? Probably.
That's a great way to look at it. That's fascinating, Doug. I love it. I love how that's a salient point right there. That's absolutely correct. And you would think also now with well, I have a question though. Why do you think it, with such a low penetration rate in the marketplace, why are so many new companies coming into the marketplace, right? And they're doing the same, they're not reinventing it. It seems like Trupanion's the only one that's made any type of innovation in the business. Nobody else is offering anything new, yet we now have more insurers screwing things up, right? Is that the state of things?
Exactly. Every time a new company announces they're offering insurance, I take a quick look at their policy, and it's more of the same, maybe a little small tweak or two here. And my question is, what's the point? I mean, I don't get it either. I'm with you. Okay. Yeah. Now we are seeing some new developments, which I think are positive. and this is something I've been advocating for a long time, is Embrace has started a brand called Paw Protect that offers I think it's a $5,000 debit card to their policyholders to use to pay those upfront costs.
That's wonderful.
Well, that's nice.
Paw Protect, and it's by Embrace.
Right.
Okay.
I'm going to interview somebody about that on my podcast later this year. But there's another company called Fursure, Fursure. That company was for several years a pet insurance aggregator, where they gave out information about 7 or 8 pet insurance companies and would allow you to get a quote. And of course, they got a affiliate fee from it, if you bought a policy or whatever. Okay. But they have apparently transitioned to actually offering a pet insurance product with a similar debit card, where they advertise, you don't have to pay your vet up front anymore, that type of thing. So we need those type of innovative products coming on the market. So Trupanion, pretty much has a lock on their direct pay through software. They patented that, so it's not available to other insurers, unfortunately. I was hoping that they might license that to other pet insurers.
That's a great idea. I hate to stop you there, but I don't want to lose this thought, because I can recommend it. They should adopt the Tesla approach. Tesla, they make almost really all their patents public, and the hopes to make them open source so that everyone benefits. And their electric charging network has always been that way. And now all the 2 or 3 other competing charging networks are now going out of business, and everyone's adopting Tesla's charging network because they're offering the patents, everything pretty much for free, saying, hey, our interests are getting adoption rate. That's our interest. Tesla looks at it from the long-term perspective and says, we want EVs to make up 20% of the marketplace. So it's like what we're saying with pet insurance. We don't want 2 to 3% of pet parents. We want 20% of pet parents. The only way to do it is to open source it and to not patent it, because we want everyone to do that. So it's interesting Trupanion went that way, and I can't blame them for doing that. I do understand that. But wow, that's fascinating. But you think with so many insurance carriers out there that this industry is really set up for some consolidation and some efficiencies. You're going to have probably some big money come in and realize, maybe some private equity companies come in and realize, hey, there's a way to streamline this, make it much more efficient. And whether that is licensing, going to Trupanion and say, we'll license your software, a percentage of however you work out the mechanics and financials of that, we'll do that. Or the debit card. Or I don't understand why there's not a Web3. There really needs to be a Web3 solution for this. I need to make a note of that Web3 solution. But it's, wow, what a fascinating industry. But I think do you feel like that we're kind of right now set up for some pretty significant change over the next few years?
Well, the last chapter in my book that I wrote is entitled My Preferred Future for Pet Insurance. And I cover all of this. And my question I ask is, who's going to come up with the next innovative solution to move pet insurance well beyond the 2 to 3% penetration rate? And it doesn't have to be another software. I mean, as you just alluded to, in any industry, people most businesses, a lot of the big businesses, who is it? Like, who was it started the airline? Richard Branson in it.
Right,
Started
Virgin Atlantic. Yeah.
Started the airline because he got stuck in an airport. His plane was canceled, so he chartered a jet and asked, how many of you want to get on my chartered plane to, so you can get out of here faster.
I think that's actually how Captain Jack started Pet Best. Actually, was he was trying to get insurance or something. I think it was. I can't recall the specific story, but his frustration with the industry of not having solutions. So this actually, I'm going to be thinking about what a solution is, what a solution might look like for the pet insurance industry, because it is really ripe for change and change in efficiency. So scaling. It's an interesting challenge to scale the pet insurance industry where you can still have the level of customer service and accessibility to the insurer and have that intimate relationship, but also have the scaling aspects where you have access to a much larger pool of capital, and it's efficient, smart capital too. That means it's like a Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett has revolutionized the insurance industry, the non-pet insurance industry, in large part through reinsurance. That's one of his really interesting products that he has to offer. So I think this is a fascinating challenge. I'm going to think about it. Probably going to be working on tonight, all night, thinking about what is that book, Doug? Where can people read your book? And you also, before I forget it, you also said you looked at somebody's policy. Do you help people and look at their policies for them? Is that something you offer as well?
I'll be glad to answer any question that anybody has and offer advice from my perspective as a veterinarian. And, I think that's important to get a veterinarian's perspective, whether it's their own veterinarian or somebody like me, because we are the ones who actually diagnose and treat the conditions that the client is going to be filing claims for. So we have a pretty good idea of what ought to be covered. And so the book is called Pet Health Insurance, A Veterinarian's Perspective.
Okay.
And you can get it on Amazon or, any online bookstore usually. So,
and people that have questions, does your podcast, is it a call-in thing, or can they email you, or how do they get access to you?
I do get people who, I think my email address is probably on the about page.
Okay.
And I do get people contact me, but people can comment on the podcast episodes, and I have to approve that to publish it. So sometimes I'm able to contact them that way. But
okay, well, some things that I'm going to look out are this Embrace and this For Sure. That's really some exciting new companies. We'll take a look at those. What are, before we're kind of running a little bit long here, we try to keep it to an hour. How long is your podcast?
It varies. If I am just offering my opinion on a particular topic, it might be as short as 20 minutes.
Okay.
If I'm interviewing somebody about, say, an insurance company representative, or I've got a number of podcast episodes where I've interviewed pet parents, and we talked about how they went about choosing a company and what's been their experience, since filing claims and so forth. Those may last 45 minutes to an hour.
Wow, wonderful. So you're all over. I guess I'm a little bit more manic, I guess, in the way, or pathological in the way I think, and I was like, I just kind of try to keep it to an hour with a little bit of margin, because I'm also a big consumer of podcasts. That's kind of how I get all my data. But let's see, what was my question, Ginger? I forgot my question. Okay, so where can people, while I'm thinking about my question, before I forget it, where can people find you on social media? We have your web address, but are you on social media as well, Doug?
The only social media I'm on is LinkedIn.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And that's where I found you.
Oh, LinkedIn, that's kind of old school. All right, but so give us your website again for your podcast so that people can find you there.
It's petinsuranceguyepodcast.com.
Yeah.
And the blog is petinsuranceguyeus.com.
Okay.
Because I only cover insurance companies in the United States.
The United States, because yeah, it's and even is pet insurance different state by state, like non-pet insurance, or is it countrywide? It's standard countrywide.
When people choose a company to insure their pet, most of the policies, like if say Trupanion's policies, it's pretty much the same in 49 states with maybe a minor change. They, in the past like 3 or so years, they launched a new policy in the state of Florida.
Okay.
And it's quite different.
Wow.
So
it does vary state to state then, or can vary state to state.
Yeah, coverage can vary state to state. So, and this is the other big thing. Pet parents have to read a sample policy.
Okay.
I mean, every word.
Okay.
Before purchasing pet insurance. And if they don't understand something, they need to contact the company and get clarification, because there are things in that policy they won't find on the website, and so and there's gotchas in there, you might call them. And in fact, some of the questions in my toolkit that I have pet parents ask, they're going to have to call the pet insurance company to get those questions answered.
That's my little nanner banana. That's my. I don't know how much we're up to in insurance costs, but we maxed out this year. So 7,000 max coverage this year. We maxed them out on that. Well, before we go, that's great information. So I hope nobody missed that. Everyone, just want to take a second to reiterate that is please go check out the petinsurancetoolkit.com because there's what he said was spot on. So are all of the sample contracts, are they required to be available on the insurer's website? How do pet parents make sure they can get a copy of the current contract, the current insurance contract?
Yeah, somewhere on that website, and it may be in the text on the home page, but you can usually find it either at the top in their menu bar. It may have sample policy, but usually you'll find it in the fine print at the bottom of the website where all the pages are listed.
Yeah,
it'll probably have a sample policy button that you can click down there.
All right. So before we go, as we wrap things up, I got to ask you. So you mentioned it earlier. So who's on your current bad list? I know it changes; it can change. But who's currently on your? Give us a couple of insurers that's on your bad list.
I'm not going to say that.
All right. Can we find that on your podcast, or do you rank them or any on your podcast?
No, and here's why. Again, let me just reiterate. When I see headlines on the first page of Google, you type in pet insurance.
Right.
Probably several of those are going to be top 10 pet insurance companies for 2023.
I see that every day I sign in.
And so my question to them is, who says?
Right.
What are your criteria for ranking those pet insurance companies? And here again, it goes back to it's an individual thing. Okay. Nationwide, maybe you've had great experiences. I've heard horror stories from other people, that have nationwide, so it just varies.
I understand. And also you have a more important role of being an educator. And that's a very important role in our society because it requires a degree of objectivity, because you want to hold companies accountable for some of the boneheaded things that they do. But on the other hand, you want to increase adoption rate. You want to be the educator, and you want to promote in pet insurance. And so you don't want to beat up insurers. You don't want to become the bad guy, but you don't want to tolerate the bad business practices that some of them unfortunately do. And the fine line and the fine print sections of the contract, coming from the business world, unfortunately, almost nearly every company has that and does that, and it's for legal reasons and other reasons. Some of them aren't malicious intended, but you always have to read the fine print. All right, Doug. We've gone a little bit long. My apologies. So did I leave you? Man, you've been a wealth of great information. Did I leave anything out, Doug? Is there anything that I missed that you want to cover or talk about?
No, I think that's that covers it pretty good. I mean, there's a lot more I could say, but I think we've hit the important points. And the main thing is just I would advise pet owners to do their due diligence when they're researching companies before purchasing, and don't just take the recommendation of their veterinarian. I hate to say that now that Ginger's, but I mean, Trupanion is a little bit of a exception here because they are the innovative company,
right,
in the last decade or so. And so Trupanion's whole model is based on close relationships to veterinarians.
And they have to protect that. That's extremely important. That's very valuable. It's a tremendous amount of goodwill, and it's very important. So, but hopefully, I think we're going to see some changes over the next few years, with as the industry evolves as well. So, it's an exciting, interesting time. Doug, I thank you for everything you did talk about, contribute here. You're always welcome back on the show if you've got something else, or just as an update or something like that. You have this is a platform that's available to you. But I got to ask you before I kick you off my show, how do you rate me as a podcaster, as an interview? How did I do?
Y'all are great. Y'all are great. And listen, some of the most notable podcasters have the top podcasts today will tell you, and I could say the same, please don't go look at my first 20 episodes.
Yeah. I know that that's true of every podcast.
I'm going to the first one as soon as we get off of here.
I do it because I love to see how they evolve, because their technology is going to suck, the audio is going to suck, it's all going to look bad and sound bad. And they're not going to have they're not going to have the style. They're not going to be in their comfort zone, which I'm not sure that's true. You've been doing it a long time, but you seem like the kind of guy that just automatically gets in the comfort zone. So, but not everybody. But
let me tell you, I was terrified the first episode.
Were you? Wow.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow. Well, this is something else I wanted to ask you before you go, Doug. Is there any of your interview, any one of your torture subjects, any one of your interviewees that you recommend for us to have on our show? Just share and people that are interesting use cases, or that have an interesting product or technology, or just an interesting story or something.
I'll tell you somebody, Ann Tomzik, who is probably manager now, maybe co-owner of the Preventive Vet website.
Okay.
Dr. Jason Nicholas started that website years ago, and I've had him on my podcast twice. And he's written several books about preventative care.
Okay.
They are, in my opinion, essential reading for
excellent
pet owners. I mean, we used to have those in our exam rooms, and when I'd walk into the exam room, I'd catch the client sitting there thumbing through that book, and their comment was, "I had no idea that this stuff was bad for my dog."
Yeah. Yeah, it's important. We don't talk enough about preventative medicine. That's true in human medicine. It's also true in veterinary medicine. And so thank you for those recommendations. We'll follow up if Ginger can remember to do so. We'll see about that. It's always questionable with her, but boy,
Questionable.
speaking of that, Ginger, we've reached that time of the show where I always ask you, how did I do? Did I screw anything up or make any mistakes this time like I do every other time?
No, not that I know of.
Okay, well, you're always too nice. You're always too nice to me.
I try to be nice. So.
All right. Well, I think we're running a bit long. So the pet cancer tip of this week is go to Puppy Up's website, Ginger, and find out the 10 early warning signs of cancer. Where can they do that?
At puppyup.org.
If we don't have a specific website for that or URL.
Well, I believe, well, no, it's on the thing. It says, cancer tips. So.
Well, but we need something like Doug has. Doug has the petinsuranceToolkit.com. We need our 10 early warning signs of pet cancer, dogcancer.com or something like that. Well, anyway, we'll figure that out. You're obviously
we want everybody to go to our website so they can see everything else that we're doing.
I'm teasing you as always.
Check out the events that are coming up.
Well, you got Doug on the show, and thank you for doing that. I didn't know anything about what you were doing, Doug, and that's a lot of really good information for pet parents in our audience. So, Doug, thank you so much for being here on this episode of Fuzzybutts and Friends.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to contribute. And
thank you so much.
Just contact me anytime you want to.
If you ever want to irritate your audience, you can always invite me on your show to talk about, because I have a lot of opinions about pet insurance, and certainly as it pertains to cancer care. And that has evolved as well as too, because back in my first case of cancer with Malcolm in 2004, I mean, it was nothing. There was nothing for cancer care back then. So it has, for the better and maybe for the worse, it's changed a lot since then, and it's evolving. So we will check in with you every once in a while, Doug, to see how things are going, see if you've gotten the pet insurance industry, whipped it into shape yet. So, all right, everybody, thanks for tuning in this week. We'll be back again every Tuesday. We drop midnight Central Time on our YouTube channel, which is fuzzybutstudios.com, or you can find us at iHeartRadio or Spotify on your podcast platform every Tuesday. We're back now that I'm feeling better and I actually have a voice and I can talk without coughing every couple of seconds. So thank you so much for tuning in this time. We'll see you next week. Puppy up. Talk soon.